Nimm dir eine Sekunde, um zu liken und zu abonnieren, das unterstützt den Kanal wirklich sehr. Los, ich warte auf dich.
Sisu, Road to Revenge, the full movie analyzed and explained. The movie opens not with a roar of action, but with a profound silence of loss. It is 1946, and the wounds of the continuation war are fresh. Finland has ceded the region of Karelia to the Soviet Union, a territorial loss that forces thousands from their ancestral homes. Into this scarred landscape returns Atami Korpi, a figure of myth and tragedy. His journey back to his former homestead in now Soviet-occupied Karelia is a pilgrimage of memory. He is not there to reclaim the land, but to salvage its soul, the very timber of the house where his family was murdered. This act immediately establishes the film's deeper thematic core. This is not a quest for riches, but for the fragments of a shattered past, a tangible connection to what was lost. Atami, once again portrayed with monumental physicality by Jorma Tommila, speaks not a word. His communication is the language of labor, of grief, and later of wrath. As he methodically dismantles his home, each pulled nail and stacked plank is a silent conversation with ghosts. This prologue is crucial, grounding the absurdity to come in tangible human pain. It transforms the lumber he loads onto his truck from simple building material into a sacred burden, a mobile tombstone, and the ultimate MacGuffin. His goal is simple: transport this memory across a hostile nation to rebuild it on safe soil, an act of defiance against erasure. The Soviet authorities, ever vigilant, detect this spectral figure from their past. In response, they make a catastrophic error. They release Colonel Igor Dragunov from a Siberian prison. Played with venomous gusto by Stephen Lang, Dragunov is not a faceless antagonist like the Nazis of the first film. He is the architect of Atami's pain, the man who personally executed his family. This choice elevates the conflict from a chase to a primal feud. Dragunov is not merely following orders. He is pursuing the one man who embodies his own failure and guilt, the immortal ghost who haunts him. Thus begins the relentless chase, the road to revenge of the title. Director Jalmari Helander structures the film like a series of escalating comic book chapters or vignettes, each presenting a new, impossible obstacle for Atami to overcome. The narrative is lean, stripping away all superfluous dialogue or subplot. It is a straight line of conflict drawn across the map, with the Finnish border as the distant, gleaming prize. The film fully embraces its described identity as a live-action cartoon, a label it wears as a badge of honor. This is where the central Finnish concept of Sisu transitions from subtext to text, manifested in the most spectacularly violent ways. Sisu, that untranslatable idea of grim, white-knuckled perseverance, of tenacity beyond all logic, is Atami's entire being. He is not a superhero with powers, he is a force of pure will. The action sequences, celebrated for their practical, old-school execution, are visceral proofs of this concept. Atami endures what no human could, not because he is invulnerable, but because he simply refuses to stop. The physics are gloriously absurd, the body count astronomical, and the inventiveness of each set piece is the film's true star. Helander's cited inspirations. Indiana Jones, James Bond, Buster Keaton are vividly apparent. There is the pulpy adventure of Jones, the cool resourcefulness of Bond, and the precise, silent physical comedy of Keaton in Atami's deadpan reactions to catastrophic events. One moment he is a vengeful deity of death, the next he is a pragmatic problem solver, using his home's timber as a raft, a shield, or a weapon. The lumber itself becomes a dynamic character, a symbol constantly reshaped by necessity, yet never losing its sacred meaning. The production, one of Finland's most expensive, wears its budget on its sleeve not in CGI spectacle, but in tangible, punishing practicality. The move to Estonia provides a convincing and vast landscape for the chase, from dense forests to stark, open roads. The stunts feel real and consequential, giving the violence a crunchy, impactful weight that fully computer-generated imagery often lacks. At a tight 89 minutes, the film is a masterclass in pacing, understanding that its purpose is to deliver a sustained adrenaline rush punctuated by moments of quiet, poignant resolve. Igor Dragunov proves to be a perfect foil. Stephen Lang imbues him with a rabid, intelligent malice. His pursuit is personal, which makes every confrontation feel charged with history. He is Atami's dark mirror. Both are relentless, both are scarred by the same event, but one is fueled by love and memory, the other by hatred and a bruised ego. This personal history injects a layer of psychological depth that was intentionally absent from the first film's more straightforward predator-prey dynamic. The thematic evolution from Sisu, 2022, to Road to Revenge is significant. The first film was a survivalist romp with a gold nugget as its prize. Here, the prize is profoundly emotional. The gold was for a future. The timber is for a past, and by extension, a future built upon that past. The shift from Nazis to a personal Soviet nemesis also reflects a nuanced historical consciousness, moving from a globally recognized evil to a more complex, personal oppression tied to Finland's specific national trauma of territorial loss. Critically, the film was hailed as a triumphant amplification of the original's formula. The 95% Rotten Tomatoes rating underscores how it delivered on and exceeded the promises of its predecessor. Reviewers consistently praised its creative violence and unwavering commitment to its own ridiculous, thrilling tone. It is a film utterly confident in what it is, a blood-soaked folktale. However, its commercial underperformance, despite wider release, is an interesting counterpoint. It may suggest that the novel thrill of the first film was harder to replicate for a mass audience, or that its more exaggerated, cartoonish tone narrowed its appeal slightly compared to the grittier survival aesthetic of the original. Yet, achieving a global total nearing its $12.2 million budget is not a disaster, especially for a Finnish production of this scale. Throughout the chaos, Atami's silence remains his most powerful trait. Tomala conveys oceans of feeling with a glance, a grunt, or the set of his jaw. His pain is evergreen, his determination tectonic. He is a folk hero in the truest sense, an archetype made flesh. His quest is revenge, yes, but it is ultimately in service of closure. He is not just killing Dragunov, he is laying his ghosts to rest by physically providing them a new home. The film's climax, inevitably, is a final, cataclysmic confrontation between the immortal and his mortal destroyer. It is satisfying not just for its visceral payoff, but because it feels earned by the weight of history between them. The resolution ties directly back to the symbolic timber, completing its journey from ruin to foundation. The new house, built plank by salvaged plank, becomes a monument to Sisu itself, proof that from utter devastation, something new and solid can be built, but never without a cost measured in blood and relentless effort. In conclusion, Sisu, Road to Revenge is a masterful exercise in focused, high-octane genre filmmaking. Jalmari Helander understands that the essence of a great action film lies not in complicated plots, but in clear motivation, inventive execution, and a palpable sense of style. It takes the raw template of the first film and injects it with a stronger emotional core, a more personal villain, and even more audacious, physically grounded set pieces. It is a film that proudly prioritizes fun, spectacle, and the catharsis of watching unstoppable force meet immovable object, where the immovable object is a man with nothing left to lose but the memory of his home. It is a triumphant, bloody, and oddly poetic sequel that runs on the relentless engine of Sisu, delivering pure, unadulterated cinematic throttle from its first mournful frame to its last resonant blow. The haunting silence of post-war Karelia is a character in itself, a landscape heavy with the memory of conflict and forced annexation. Atami Korpi moves through this silence like a ghost from a past the Soviets wished to forget. His return is an act of profound defiance, not with weapons initially, but with simple tools for dismantling his own history. This quiet opening establishes a solemn, almost sacred tone that makes the coming storm of violence feel earned and deeply personal. The timber he salvages is not mere wood. It is the physical manifestation of a stolen life, each plank etched with invisible memories. His mission transforms from a simple task of relocation into a spiritual quest for reconciliation with a past he could not protect. The vast, empty skies of the Estonian filmed locations emphasize his monumental isolation and the sheer scale of his seemingly impossible journey. Director Jalmari Helander masterfully contrasts this solemnity with the brutal bureaucracy of the Soviet state. The decision to free Igor Dragunov is presented with chilling casualness, highlighting the regime's view of individuals as disposable tools. Dragunov's introduction in the stark confines of a Siberian prison immediately paints him as a rabid animal, barely contained by the state that now unleashes him. This creates a fascinating dynamic. The hunter is himself a prisoner, his freedom contingent on destroying another. Their fates are inextricably linked in a cycle of violence that predates the film's opening frame. The Soviet officers see this as a neat solution, unaware they are reigniting a primal feud that will consume their resources. Dragunov's personal vendetta injects a venomous specificity into what could have been a generic manhunt narrative. The chase itself unfolds with the relentless logic of a nightmare or a particularly inventive folktale. Helander's chapter-based structure allows each sequence to function as a self-contained set piece of survival and retaliation. We move from a tense, vehicular pursuit across open tundra to close-quarters brutality in confined spaces like barns or makeshift camps. The live-action cartoon aesthetic is fully realized through physics-defying stunts and Atami's seemingly infinite capacity for punishment. Yet, this absurdity is always anchored by Tomala's intensely grounded physical performance. His Atami feels every impact, strains with every exertion, and his eyes carry the cumulative weight of decades of loss. The cartoonish violence works because the emotional pain at its core is portrayed with such raw authenticity. Stephen Lang's portrayal of Dragunov deserves particular attention for avoiding one-dimensional villainy. He is a monster, certainly, but one driven by a corroded sense of military pride and a gnawing obsession. Killing Atami's family was an act of wartime brutality, but Atami's subsequent legendary status and apparent immortality have turned that act into a personal affront to Dragunov's prowess. He is hunting not just a man, but his own mythic failure. Lang plays this with a feverish intensity, his dialogue often spitting with rage at the absurdity of his quarry's resilience. He represents a system that believes all things, even legends, can be broken with enough force. His eventual desperation is a direct result of confronting something his ideology cannot explain: pure, untamed Sisu. The symbolism of the house timber evolves wonderfully throughout the narrative. It begins as a coffin for memories, becomes a burden during the chase, is repurposed as a tool and weapon, and finally achieves its destiny as a foundation. In one remarkable sequence, Atami uses the planks to create a makeshift raft, literally floating his past across a river to safety. This visual metaphor is potent. He is using the wreckage of his old life to sustain his journey toward a new one. The timber is forever marked by the journey, scarred by bullet holes and stained with the blood of his enemies, integrating this new violence into the very fabric of the home he will rebuild. It becomes a testament to a life not defined by loss, but forged by the relentless will to move beyond it. The action choreography stands as a testament to the power of practical effects and clever cinematography. When Atami turns a simple logging chain into a whirling weapon of mass destruction, the tactile reality of the metal, the weight of its swing, and the visceral impacts are all palpable. The film finds grotesque humor in these moments, such as the absurdly inventive ways vehicles are destroyed or the darkly comic fate of overconfident Soviet soldiers. This balance of extreme violence and slight levity prevents the film from collapsing under its own grim weight, aligning it with the tone of classic adventure serials where the hero's ingenuity is a source of delight. The sound design amplifies this, with every crunch, squelch, and ricochet delivered with shocking clarity. Atami's near-supernatural endurance is the cinematic embodiment of Sisu. It is important to note that his immortality is not portrayed as a magical power, but as the extreme exaggeration of human will. He gets wounded, he bleeds profusely, he is battered and exhausted. Yet he always rises. This key distinction keeps him relatable as a tragic figure rather than a distant superhero. His struggle is a physical performance of grief transforming into purpose. Each time he pushes his broken body forward, it is a silent scream of dedication to the memory he carries on his truck. The enemies who witness this see not a man, but a force of nature, an unstoppable phenomenon that erodes their military discipline and unleashes primal fear. The film also offers subtle commentary on occupation and resistance. The Soviet soldiers, while broadly antagonistic, are not all portrayed as faceless goons. Some show fear, confusion, or reluctant admiration for the mythic figure tearing through their ranks. They are cogs in a vast machine, utterly unprepared for a threat that operates on a personal, mythic level outside their doctrine. Atomi's guerrilla war against them becomes a symbolic act of resistance for a silenced Finland, a one-man insurgency against an occupying power. His journey to the border mirrors the desired journey of every displaced Karelian, to reclaim something, anything, from the land they were forced to abandon. Jorma Tommela's performance is a masterclass in nonverbal acting. With no dialogue, he must convey Atomi's entire internal world through his body and his eyes. A slight tremor in his hand while touching a doorframe speaks of overwhelming grief. A determined set of his jaw as he loads the truck reveals his iron resolve. A flash of animalistic fury in his eyes during combat shows the pain transformed into rage. He communicates more with a single grunt than many actors do with pages of script. This choice roots the film's most absurd moments in a deeply human center, making Atomi a timeless archetype, the silent, wounded warrior on a path only he can walk. The film's pacing is meticulously engineered for maximum impact. The quiet, methodical beginning allows the audience to invest in the emotional weight of Atomi's mission. Once the chase is ignited, the film becomes a relentless downhill sprint, with brief, almost meditative pauses that allow tension to rebuild and the audience to catch their breath. These pauses are often where we see Atomi's vulnerability, as he tends to his wounds or gazes at a photograph, reinforcing what he is fighting for. Helander understands that action without stakes is empty, and these quiet moments are the crucible where the stakes are continually reforged in the heat of memory. The critical acclaim for the film stems from its confident execution of a specific, heightened vision. It does not aspire to be a gritty, realistic war drama, nor does it descend into pure parody. It finds a unique tonal sweet spot, embracing glorious excess while maintaining a straight face. The praise for its consistently and creatively violent nature highlights how the inventiveness of the mayhem is itself an artistic pursuit. Each confrontation feels designed to top the last in both scale and sheer audacity, yet they remain coherent and thrillingly staged, a testament to the director and stunt team's clear vision. In comparing it to its predecessor, Road to Revenge trades the claustrophobic, wilderness-bound tension of the original for a more epic road movie scale. The first film's Atomi was a predator in his natural element, defending his claim. Here, he is a trespasser in hostile territory, constantly on the move, which changes the dynamics of the conflict. The enemy is also more pervasive and organized, representing a state rather than a rogue military unit. This shift raises the stakes significantly, transforming the struggle from survival against bandits into a symbolic battle against an entire political apparatus. The character of Igor Dragunov provides a necessary human focus for the Soviet threat. Whereas the Nazis in the first film were a collective embodiment of evil, Dragunov is a singular, hateful consciousness. This allows the final confrontation to be a cathartic release of the personal history established in the film's prologue. Their battle is not just about escape or victory. It is about the end of a story that began with a massacre. Dragunov's defeat must be more total and humiliating than that of a random officer, and the film delivers this with brutal finality, ensuring the vengeance feels specific and complete. The production design meticulously crafts a world that feels authentically period yet heightened. The vehicles, uniforms, and weapons are historically grounded, but the world is filtered through a stark, almost graphic novel-like aesthetic. The color palette moves from the cold blues and grays of the Soviet interiors to the harsh, dusty browns and greens of the exterior landscapes, occasionally punctuated by the shocking crimson of blood. This deliberate visual style reinforces the film's identity as a mythic tale, a story passed down and embellished, rather than a strict historical document. The concept of home is relentlessly explored through Atomi's journey. For him, home is not a location on a map conceded in a treaty. It is an idea, a collection of memories made tangible in wood and nail. His physical transportation of the house is the ultimate act of defiance against geopolitical forces that treat land and people as pawns. It declares that what makes a home is not the soil, but the history and love embedded within it, and those can be carried anywhere. This transforms the film's climax, the rebuilding, into a genuinely triumphant and moving act of creation emerging from a saga of destruction. The film's commercial performance, while below its predecessor, exists in the complex landscape of international cinema. Its wider U.S. release on over 2,000 screens was a bold bet on the growing niche for high-quality, non-English language genre films. That it did not translate to a higher opening might reflect the challenges of marketing a sequel that is both more exaggerated and more personally focused than the original, which benefited from the simple, high-concept hook of John Wick versus Nazis. Nevertheless, its strong critical scores and audience approval suggest it will find a robust and dedicated life in home media and streaming, cementing its status as a cult action classic. Ultimately, Sisu, Road to Revenge succeeds because it understands and amplifies the core appeal of its hero. Atami Korpi is a vessel for the audience's desire to see resilience personified, to see grief transformed into unstoppable action, and to witness the mythic triumph of a single will against overwhelming oppression. It is a film that celebrates practical filmmaking craft, narrative economy, and pure visceral excitement. By tying its spectacular set pieces to the profoundly human symbol of a family home, it ensures its violence has heart and its silence speaks volumes. It is not just a sequel, it is a refinement and an expansion, a bold declaration that the spirit of Sisu can carry a story, and a house, through any hell imaginable. The profound silence that opens the film is not merely an absence of sound, but a palpable entity, a vacuum left by the echoes of war and displacement. This auditory emptiness makes the subsequent cacophony of engines, gunfire, and splintering would feel like a violent intrusion into a sacred space. Atami's laborious dismantling of his home is filmed with a ritualistic reverence, each creaking plank and protesting nail sounding like a lament. This careful establishment of mood ensures that when the first Soviet jeep appears on the horizon, its mechanical growl is received as a profound desecration. The tranquility of the landscape itself seems to recoil at this invasion, setting the stage for a conflict that is as much about violating memory as it is about territorial control. Atami Korpi's physicality, portrayed with monumental stillness by Jorma Tommila, communicates a history far deeper than any expository dialogue could. His scars are a topographic map of past wars, and his deliberate movements suggest a man conserving a vast, internal energy for the trials ahead. When he finally swings into action, the contrast is seismic. The coiled spring of his grief releases with terrifying kinetic force. His fighting style is not that of a trained, elegant martial artist, but of a primal force, utilizing farm tools and environmental hazards with the brutal efficiency of a man who has long since abandoned the rules of civilized combat. Every grunt, every strained breath, is a syllable in the sparse language of his character. Igor Dragunov's introduction within the stark, concrete confines of a Siberian gulag immediately establishes him as a creature of the state, yet one too feral to be fully controlled. Stephen Lang imbues him with a predatory intelligence that simmers beneath a surface of disciplined rage. His release is a Faustian bargain for the Soviet authorities. They believe they are unleashing a weapon, but they are actually reigniting a personal apocalypse. Dragunov's obsession is not purely professional, it is deeply psychological. Atami represents the one victim who refused to die, the unfinished business that undermines Dragunov's own myth of ruthless efficacy. This transforms their chase from a military operation into a dark pilgrimage for the colonel. The film's visual language consistently frames Atami in relation to the vast, often oppressive landscapes, emphasizing his solitude and the monumental scale of his task. Wide shots show his truck as a mere speck on a sprawling tundra, a visual metaphor for the individual against the machinery of the state. Conversely, the Soviets are often shown in tight, crowded groups within their vehicles or camps, highlighting their institutional nature and their psychological need for the collective. Atami's strength is born of his isolation, while their weakness is inherent in their pack mentality. Jalmari Hellender's direction exhibits a masterful understanding of pacing, using the chapter structure to control rhythm and tension. Each segment functions like a level in a particularly brutal and inventive video game, presenting a unique environmental puzzle and a fresh wave of adversaries. This structure allows for a varied pacing within the overall relentless momentum. A chapter may begin with a slow, tense game of cat and mouse in a fog-shrouded forest before erupting into a frenetic burst of close-quarters carnage. The audience is given just enough narrative breath before being plunged into the next meticulously staged sequence of challenges. The symbolic journey of the house timber is the film's unwavering emotional through-line. Initially, it is a coffin for a murdered past, carefully disinterred. During the chase, it becomes both an albatross and a lifeline, its weight slowing him down yet its substance repeatedly saving him. When Atami uses planks to brace a wound or fashion a lever, he is literally integrating his history into his present survival. The timber is baptized in river water, blackened by gunpowder, and stained by the blood of foes, becoming a palimpsest of his journey. Its final destination, as the frame for a new home, represents the ultimate triumph. Not the recovery of what was lost, but the construction of something new from its enduring essence. The action set pieces are choreographed with a brilliant, often darkly comic, sense of cause and effect that feels inspired by the Rube Goldberg mechanics of silent cinema or classic cartoons. A triggered trap doesn't just kill one man. It sets off a chain reaction that dismantles an entire vehicle in a series of increasingly improbable and gruesome steps. The film delights in this cause and effect absurdity, yet grounds it in a tangible, physical world. We see the mechanisms, hear the strain of metal, and witness the laws of physics not being broken so much as being bent to the absolute limit by Atami's sheer, stubborn will. Stephen Lang's performance finds fascinating shades within Dragunov's monolithic villainy. As his casualties mount and his quarry remains frustratingly alive, his rage curdles into a form of bewildered superstition. He begins to question not just his tactics, but the very nature of the being he hunts. Is Corpy a man, a demon, or a force of the land itself? This psychological erosion is more damaging to him than any physical wound. Lang allows us to see the cracks in the Colonel's ideological armor, revealing a terrified man confronting a phenomenon his worldview cannot categorize or conquer. The film's sound design is a character in itself, meticulously building its world through a rich tapestry of auditory detail. The distinct report of different period firearms, the groan of fatigued truck engines, the crisp sound of boots on frost-hardened earth, all create a dense, believable environment. This makes the moments of extreme, stylized violence even more impactful. The wet crunch of a creatively executed kill is heightened because it occurs within such an acoustically realistic frame. The score, by Yuri Sepa and Tuomas Wainola, is used sparingly but effectively, often swelling in moments of mythic action or retreating entirely to let the natural and violent sounds dominate. Atami's near invulnerability is consistently framed as a product of Sisu, not magic. The camera does not shy away from the cost. We see wounds open, bones likely fracture, and exhaustion threaten to overwhelm him. His immortality is an act of perpetual defiance against biological limits. He succeeds not because he doesn't feel pain, but because he chooses again and again to act in spite of it. This crucial distinction maintains a thread of vulnerability that makes his journey tense and his resilience awe-inspiring. He is not a superhero. He is the ultimate testament to human endurance pushed into the realm of legend. The Soviet soldiers, while collectively the antagonist force, are occasionally granted glimpses of individuality that make the conflict more textured. A young conscript might hesitate, his face a mask of fear rather than hatred. A more seasoned sergeant might bark orders with a tone of weary frustration rather than zeal. These small moments prevent the Red Army from becoming a purely faceless horde and instead present it as a system of men, some cruel, some merely obedient, all ill-equipped to deal with a force of nature like Corpy. Their systemic failure in the face of individual will is a subtle but powerful thread. Hellander's cinematic influences are woven into the film's DNA not as mimicry, but as evolved homage. The sprawling chase sequences, and the hero's clever use of his environment recall the adventurous spirit of Indiana Jones. The cool, resourceful improvisation with everyday objects echoes the gadget-less ingenuity of James Bond. Most profoundly, the silent physical performance and the embrace of spectacular, danger-defying stunts rooted in real physics are a direct lineage from the work of Buster Keaton. Atami Corpy is, in many ways, a Keaton hero thrust into a hyper-violent mid-20th century landscape, his deadpan expression unchanged whether facing a collapsing bridge or a machine gun nest. The theme of memory is explored not just through Atami's mission, but through the very land he traverses. This is occupied Karelia, a place where Finnish memories are buried under Soviet imposition. Atomi's violent passage is a symbolic awakening of those buried memories, a literal and bloody reminder of the past the occupiers seek to suppress. Each fallen Soviet soldier is a mark on the landscape, a temporary scar that speaks of resistance. His journey is an act of remembrance so forceful it reshapes the present geography through conflict. The color grading of the film is a deliberate and effective tool. The flashback to his family's murder is bathed in a warmer, almost golden hue, a stark contrast to the cold, desaturated blues and grays of the present-day occupation. This visual choice instantly codifies the past as a lost paradise, a source of warmth he carries within him. As the chase progresses, splashes of vivid color become associated with violence. The bright orange of explosions, the shocking red of blood against snow, the vibrant yellow of burning fuel. The film's palette is thus emotionally coded, telling the story of a warm memory defended with cold fury and hot blood. The critical success of the film, surpassing even its beloved predecessor, speaks to its refined execution. Critics recognize that it took the raw template of Sisu and enhanced it with a more compelling emotional stake, a home versus gold, and a more personally hateable villain. The praise for its creatively violent nature acknowledges that the violence is not gratuitous, but artistic and inventive, a core part of the film's entertainment value and unique identity. It is violence with a purpose, both narratively and aesthetically. In its commercial context, the film's performance highlights the unpredictable nature of niche genre cinema. A wider release does not always guarantee a larger audience, as the film's more exaggerated tone may have narrowed its appeal slightly compared to the grounded, survivalist aesthetic of the first. However, its strongholds and audience scores suggest a deeply engaged core viewership. Its financial life will undoubtedly be long on streaming platforms, where its tight runtime and high rewatchability will be major assets, allowing it to be discovered and celebrated as a future cult classic. The final confrontation between Atomy and Dragunov is satisfying because it is both physically monumental and psychologically resolved. It is not enough for Dragunov to simply be shot. He must be defeated in a manner that annihilates his worldview. Atomy achieves this by using the environment, his endurance, and the very symbol of what Dragunov destroyed, the timber of the home, to orchestrate his end. The colonel is not just killed. He is erased by the legacy he sought to extinguish, a poetic closure that fulfills the promise of the road to revenge. The film's ending, with Atomy rebuilding his home in the safety of Finland, is a powerful and quiet denouement. After the sensory overload of the chase, we are returned to the sound of hammering, of creation. The house, now integrated with the scars of its journey, rises again. It is not a replica, but an evolution, a home fortified by the trials endured to reclaim it. Atomy's silent gaze at the completed structure is the film's true resolution. The revenge is complete, the memory has been given a new foundation, and the relentless engine of Sisu can finally idle, having reached its destination. The road ends and a home begins. The cinematic landscape of post-war Karelia is presented not just as a setting, but as a psychological state. This is a land suffering from collective amnesia, imposed by treaties and enforced by foreign soldiers. Atomy Corpy's arrival is a sudden, piercing act of remembrance that the earth itself seems to recognize. His every footfall on the familiar, yet forfeited, soil is a quiet rebellion. The process of dismantling his home becomes a methodical deconstruction of the Soviet narrative of permanent occupation. He is not fleeing. He is carefully extracting proof that a different story happened here, a story of family and life that predates the current maps. This foundational act imbues his entire journey with the weight of historical reclamation. Jorma Tommela's embodiment of Atomy evolves from the mythic prospector of the first film into a figure of profound, silent archaeology. He is unearthing his own past, and the physical toll of this excavation is etched into his very movements. His strength is not the explosive power of youth, but the deep, resilient strength of bedrock, forged under immense pressure and time. When violence finds him, it feels like a geological event. His reactions are tectonic, shifting from stillness to devastating motion with a seismic suddenness that terrifies his pursuers. He fights with the terrifying economy of a natural disaster, expending only the energy required to obliterate the obstacle before him. Igor Dragunov represents the antithesis of this organic force. He is a perfect product of a sterile, mechanistic ideology. Stephen Lang portrays him as a man who has replaced his conscience with a filing cabinet of military protocols and grudges. His release from the Gulag is not a redemption but a recalibration. He is a malfunctioning tool taken out of the box for one last use. His obsession with Atomy is a corruption of logic, a personal variable his Soviet programming cannot resolve. The chase, for him, becomes a desperate attempt to debug the irrational from the world, to prove that his system of order can ultimately delete the anomalous file named Corpy. The film's masterful use of scale consistently highlights the thematic core of individual versus institution. Aerial shots depict Soviet convoys snaking through valleys like lines of ants, emphasizing their numerical but impersonal power. In stark contrast, intimate close-ups on Atomy's hands, gripping a steering wheel, wrapping a wound, feeling the grain of his timber, highlight the deeply personal, tactile nature of his struggle. The conflict is visualized as one of overwhelming mass against immeasurable density. The Soviets have the mass of men and metal, but Atomy possesses the density of a neutron star, an unimaginable weight of purpose compressed into a single man. Jalmari Hellender's chapter structure functions like a series of brutal folktales being told around a campfire. Each segment could stand alone as a parable of Sisu, a how Atomy escaped the tank, or how Atomy turned the river against them story. This structure taps into the myth-making process itself. It suggests that what we are watching is not a literal document, but the legendary accretion of stories that have grown around this immortal figure. The slight exaggeration, the glorious absurdity of the action, feels intentional, as if acknowledging that truth becomes amplified in the telling of such extraordinary resilience. The symbolic cargo of timber undergoes a constant, fascinating metamorphosis. From sacred relic, it becomes practical burden, then transformative tool, and finally sacred relic again. In its most potent moments, it serves as a direct extension of Atomy's will. He does not merely use a plank as a lever. He uses the memory of his daughter's bedroom floor to pry open the jaws of a trap. The wood carries the emotional resonance of every room it once constituted, and that resonance is weaponized. Its final destination as a home is therefore not a return to the past, but the creation of a monument to the journey itself, a house that is, in its very beams, a narrative of survival. The choreography of violence operates on a darkly comedic principle of extreme consequence. A single bullet doesn't just hit a fuel drum. It initiates a cascading series of explosions that dismantles an entire outpost with the precise, ironic misfortune of a domino chain. This approach generates a unique rhythm where tension builds not through traditional suspense, but through the anticipation of inevitable, creatively catastrophic payoff. The audience learns to scan the frame for Chekhov's potential weapons: a dangling hook, a loose cable, a precariously stacked crate. Knowing Hellender's direction will inevitably use them in the most unexpectedly direct manner, Dragonov's psychological unraveling is a slow, delicious spectacle. Stephen Lang masterfully charts his descent from cold, calculating hunter to superstitious, furious believer in the supernatural. Each failed ambush, each miraculous escape by Corpy, chips away at his Enlightenment-era faith in systems and firepower. He begins to see Sisu not as a concept but as a witchcraft, a primal magic of the Finnish wilderness that defies his modern, Soviet rationality. His final confrontation is thus not just a battle for survival, but a crisis of faith, where he must face the terrifying possibility that the world contains forces his ideology has no lexicon to describe. The auditory landscape is a meticulously layered character. Beyond the gunfire and engines, the sound design emphasizes the materiality of the world. The groan of weight-bearing timber, the crunch of gravel under boot, the howl of wind across the plains. This rich tapestry of diegetic sound makes the moments of strategic silence. Atomy holding his breath underwater, the calm before a detonation, exceptionally powerful. The score is strategically absent for much of the chase, making its sudden, orchestral swells during moments of mythic action or poignant memory feel earned and emotionally transformative. Atomy's endurance is presented as a form of extreme ecology. He is like a lichen on a rock, a life form that survives not by conquering its environment, but by becoming indistinguishable from it, by withstanding its extremes. He uses the mud, the ice, the river, and the forest not just as cover, but as extensions of his own body and will. His Sisu is an environmental force. This is why the Soviet machinery feels so invasive. It is loud, oily, and artificial, clashing violently with the natural world that Atomy has learned to merge with. His victory is, in a sense, the land itself rejecting the foreign body of the occupation. The Soviet apparatus is portrayed with a nuanced eye for its internal hierarchies and frailties. While Dragunov is the driven madman, the common soldiers and junior officers often display a pragmatic, even weary, desire to simply survive their posting. Their pursuit is frequently fueled less by ideological fervor and more by fear of Dragunov's reprisal or the rigid demands of the chain of command. This creates moments of dark humor and pathos, as these men, trapped in a system, are ordered to chase a phantom who operates entirely outside any system they comprehend. They are casualties of a bureaucratic mandate as much as of Atami's wrath. Hellander's synthesis of influences results in a unique tonal alchemy. From the spaghetti western, he takes the lone figure in the vast, morally ambiguous landscape and the stylized, almost musical pacing of violence. From the survival thriller, he borrows the relentless pressure and the creative use of limited resources. From animation, he adopts the elasticity of cause and effect and the clear, expressive visual storytelling. This blend creates a genre that is distinctly his own, a Nordic pulp folktale, told with blockbuster conviction and art house precision. The act of transporting the home is an act of counter-history. In an era where borders were redrawn and populations displaced, Atami performs a radical, personal act of border defiance. He declares that the true map is not the one in Moscow, but the one in his heart, defined by memory and anchored by physical artifact. His bloody path to the border is a red line drawn across the Soviet map, a correction. He is not seeking political asylum. He is transporting a sovereign piece of territory, the nation of his past, to a new future. The film's visual contrast is a narrative device in itself. The monochrome palette of the Soviet world, drab uniforms, gray skies, concrete structures, is constantly violated by the vivid organic tones associated with Atami. The deep brown of his timber, the crimson of his and his enemy's blood, the orange of fire, the green of the deep forest. He is a splash of vital, living color bleeding into a grayscale world of control. His journey is visually a process of recoloration, of forcing life and vivid memory back into a landscape that authority has tried to render dull and submissive. The critical embrace of the film stems from its confident execution as a pure, high-octane genre piece that is also deeply thoughtful. It demonstrates that intelligence in filmmaking is not solely the domain of dense dialogue or complex plots, but can reside in conceptual clarity, thematic consistency, and masterful control of cinematic language. The film thinks deeply about history, memory, and national identity, but it transmits those ideas through the visceral medium of a harpoon through a truck engine or a man using a log as a battering ram. Financially, the film's journey reflects the evolving landscape of global cinema. Its performance is a case study in the difference between a breakout original and a dedicated sequel. While it may not have captured the same lightning-in-a-bottle surprise of the first, its strong critical reception ensures a long-tail cultural life. It solidifies the Sisu universe as a viable brand for a specific kind of audience, one that values practical effects, mythic storytelling, and action with a palpable, thematic weight. Its legacy will be measured less in opening weekend totals and more in its enduring status as a benchmark for inventive, international action. The climax between Atami and Dragunov transcends a simple fight. It is a collision of philosophies. Dragunov, representing the man who believes he can erase history, finally confronts the living embodiment of history, refusal to be erased. Atami's victory is not just physical overpowering. It is the demonstration that the past, when carried with sufficient resolve, becomes an unstoppable force in the present. Dragunov is crushed not by a man, but by the cumulative weight of all the memories he thought he had destroyed, given form and fury in Atami's fists and the very timber of the house. The final frames of the film achieve a profound peace that is hard-won and deeply satisfying. The hammering of nails is the only sound, a rhythmic, constructive counterpoint to the staccato gunfire that has dominated the soundtrack. The new house, standing in the Finnish forest, is a hybrid entity. Its soul is old Karelia, its body scarred by the road through Soviet territory, and its foundation is now firmly on free soil. Atami's gaze upon it holds no smile, but a deep, settled certainty. The road to revenge has ended at the doorstep of a future. The cycle of violence is closed, and the work of memory, now safely housed, can finally begin its quieter, eternal vigil. A profound melancholy permeates the air of the ceded territory, a sorrow that seems woven into the very soil and mist. This opening atmosphere establishes the film not as a romp, but as a eulogy in motion, a mournful foundation upon which spectacular violence will be constructed. Atami Corpi's arrival is less an intrusion than a haunting, the return of a spirit to a place from which it was violently exorcised. His careful, almost tender dismantling of the homestead feels like a sacred disinterment, a recovery of relics from a lost civilization that existed only for him. Each board he stacks is a word in a silent language of loss, assembling a narrative of absence that his pursuerians will fatally fail to read. The Soviets, in their bureaucratic vigilance, mistake his act of memory for an act of espionage or sabotage, revealing their fundamental inability to comprehend anything that does not serve a direct strategic purpose. Jorma Tommela's performance is a masterclass in embodied history. His Atami moves with the deliberate, heavy grace of a monument that has decided to walk. The countless scars covering his body are not just marks of past battles, but a topographical record of a life defined by conflict, each one a valley on a map of survival. His silence is a fortress, impenetrable and self-contained, making the few guttural sounds he emits, a grunt of effort, a sharp exhale of pain, feel like seismic events. This economy of expression forces the audience to project meaning onto his actions, to read the determination in the set of his shoulders and the flicker of memory in his eyes. He becomes a canvas upon which we paint our understanding of grief, resolve, and righteous fury, a figure whose very lack of explanation amplifies his mythic stature. Igor Dragunov, in contrast, is a man of corroded and toxic verbosity. Stephen Lang imbues him with a rhetorical venom, his speeches to his men a mixture of communist dogma and personal vendetta, revealing how ideology can warp into a cover for profound psychological sickness. His obsession is not merely professional, it is existential. Atami's survival and legendary status represent a permanent stain on Dragunov's record, a living refutation of his claim to total efficacy. Hunting him becomes a quest for personal sanitization, an attempt to erase the one piece of evidence that proves he is not a perfect instrument of the state, but a flawed, brutal man. The state, in unleashing him, believes it is wielding a scalpel to remove a nuisance, not realizing it has released a cancer that will consume its own resources. The film's visual dichotomy between the organic and the mechanical is a constant, eloquent theme. Atami is consistently framed within nature, emerging from water, silhouetted against forest, coated in mud and earth. He is an element, as natural as stone or timber. The Soviet pursuit, however, is a symphony of grinding metal. The tracks of armored cars, the engines of trucks, the cold steel of weapons. This contrast defines the conflict's essence, a struggle between an ancient, rooted force and a modern, invasive machine. The machines are loud and powerful but brittle. Atami is quiet and enduring. His victories often involve turning the Soviets' own machinery against them, orchestrating malfunctions and collisions that highlight the fragility of their technological advantage in the face of primal, adaptive will. Director Jalmari Hellender's use of the chapter structure evokes the feeling of a serialized adventure, a string of perilous episodes, each with its own internal logic and climax. This structure allows for a varied exploration of different action genres within the whole. A chase sequence here, a trap-laden standoff there, a moment of vehicular mayhem elsewhere. It creates a rhythmic pulse for the film, a cycle of tension and release that mirrors Atami's own experience of being hunted, confronting, and overcoming. The chapter titles themselves, often single evocative words, function like legends on a map, charting the progress of this brutal odyssey and lending it an air of fabled inevitability. The timber's transformation from structure to cargo to weapon and back to structure is the film's most potent arc. It begins as a monument, is reduced to a load, and through necessity is reborn as an extension of Atami's own body and will. In one particularly resonant moment, he might use a plank not just as a bridge or a shield, but to perform a task that directly echoes its original peaceful function, using a shelf to hold something precious, a beam to provide shelter. This cyclical journey of the wood suggests that the essence of home is not static location but utility, protection, and memory, qualities that can be applied anywhere, even in the midst of chaos. The final, rebuilt house is therefore not a replica, but a testament, its very substance a physical archive of the journey taken to resurrect it. The action's creative violence operates on a principle of darkly poetic justice. Traps don't just kill, They repurpose the environment and the enemy's own momentum against them with a brutal elegance. A falling tree might crush a vehicle in a way that seems both accidentally perfect and karmically appropriate. This approach gives the violence a stylistic signature that feels inventive rather than gratuitous. It is violence as problem-solving, as a grimly practical form of engineering, where Atami is both architect and demolition expert. The audience's thrill comes not from the bloodshed itself, but from the brilliant, often shocking, ingenuity of its application. A macabre puzzle where every solution is both lethal and logically consistent within the film's exaggerated reality. Dragunov's psychological descent is charted through his deteriorating command presence. Initially, he barks orders with crisp, assured authority. As Atami slips through his nets again and again, that authority frays. His commands become more frantic, his theories more paranoid, his punishments of his own men more irrational. He transitions from a calculating hunter to a superstitious believer, starting to see patterns of fate and supernatural resilience where there is only sheer, human Sisu. Lang brilliantly shows a man whose worldview is crumbling under the weight of an anomaly he cannot process. By the end, he is not a colonel leading men, but a haunted individual leading a personal crusade, his connection to the Soviet system severed by his all-consuming obsession. The sound design constructs a world of stark auditory contrasts. The natural soundscape, wind, water, birdsong, is the baseline, the sound of the land Atami understands. The Soviet intrusion is signaled by a wave of industrial noise. Distant engines, radio static, the metallic clang of weapons. Atami's actions often create a fusion of these sounds. The organic thud of an axe striking might be followed by the metallic scream of a severed fuel line. The sparing use of a musical score makes its appearances profoundly impactful. It swells not during the fight itself, but in the moments of mythic resolve just before, or in the quiet, sorrowful moments of remembrance, sonically elevating Atami's personal crusade to the level of epic poetry. Atami's resilience is portrayed as a form of deep ecological knowledge. He survives not in spite of the harsh environment, but because he has become a component of it. He knows how to read the weather, use the terrain for cover and ambush, and endure cold and pain as natural states. His Sisu is the human expression of a landscape's endurance. The Soviets, in their uniforms and vehicles, are alien to this ecology. They get stuck in mud, are blinded by fog, are deafened by their own noise. Atami's victories are often environmental. He lets the land fight for him, orchestrating situations where a river, a cliff, or a forest becomes his most effective ally against the mechanized invaders. The Soviet rank and file are presented not as monsters, but as men trapped within a vast, impersonal machine. Their dialogue reveals mundane concerns, fear, and a desire to simply get through the day. This nuanced portrayal makes their encounters with Atami more tragic and terrifying. They are not ideological zealots meeting a worthy foe, but often confused conscripts facing a force of nature they were never trained to combat. Their deaths, while spectacular, carry a hint of pathos. They are casualties of Dragunov's madness and a system that views them as expendable assets in a hunt it does not fully understand. This adds a layer of grim realism to the cartoonish violence, reminding us that the cost of this personal war is paid in anonymous blood. Élan des genre fusion créate à unique cinématique à loi. From war films, he takes the tactile grit and period detail. From westerns, he borrows the lone wanderer mythology and the showdown structure. From silent film, he adopts the emphasis on visual storytelling and physical performance. From the video game aesthetic, he incorporates the concept of escalating boss fights and environmental puzzle solving. This blend feels entirely fresh, resulting in a movie that is both nostalgically familiar in its homage and bracingly original in its execution. It is a film that understands the universal language of action cinema and speaks it with a distinct Nordic accent. The Journey of the Home Timber is a radical act of cultural preservation. In a time of forced assimilation and erased histories, Atami is performing a one-man salvage operation for his heritage. He refuses to let his past be paved over by the new political reality. Each mile he drives, each enemy he fends off, is a defiant statement that some things are non-negotiable, that identity rooted in memory and place cannot be ceded in a treaty. His blood-streaked path to the border is a literal and metaphorical repatriation of a stolen legacy. He is not smuggling contraband, he is smuggling a soul. The film's color narrative is a subtle but powerful emotional guide. The pervasive cool blues and grays of the present-day sequences convey the coldness of the occupation and the numbness of Atami's grief. Flashbacks are bathed in golden, sun-drenched tones, a visual representation of a lost paradise. The violence introduces jarring, hot colors, the blazing orange of fire, the vivid crimson of blood. As the film progresses and Atami moves closer to his goal, these warm tones begin to seep into the present, most notably in the final scenes of rebuilding under a setting or rising sun. The visual palette thus charts his emotional journey from cold grief, through hot rage, and finally toward a hard-won, warm resolution. The critical success of the sequel highlights its achievement in deepening the franchise's foundations. Where the first film was a masterful exercise in lean, efficient genre thrills, the sequel uses that established language to explore more complex themes of memory, history, and closure. Critics recognized that it had matured from a pure action pastiche into a film with a resonant, melancholic heart, without sacrificing any of the inventive spectacle that defined the original. It proved the concept had emotional and thematic depth to match its visceral impact, elevating it beyond a mere novelty. Commercially, the film's performance speaks to the niche but passionate appeal of expertly crafted genre fare. Its box office, while not blockbuster level, is respectable for a finished production of its scale and guarantees its place as a cult cornerstone. Its true value lies in its demonstration of artistic ambition within a populist framework. It proves that a film can be relentlessly entertaining, while also being thematically rich, visually sophisticated, and anchored by a profound sense of place and history. Its legacy will be as a model for how to make intelligent, distinctive action cinema outside the Hollywood system. The final confrontation transcends physical combat to become a symbolic reckoning. Dragunov, the man who sought to erase Atami's history, is ultimately destroyed by the very artifacts of that history. The landscape Atami knows intimately, the tools born from his homestead, the relentless will forged in that home's destruction. Atami doesn't just kill Dragunov. He demonstrates the futility of Dragunov's entire worldview. The colonel dies not understanding the force that killed him, defeated by a concept, Sisu, that his ideology denied could exist. It is a victory of spirit over system, of memory over oblivion. The concluding moments achieve a powerful, wordless catharsis. The act of rebuilding is shown with the same deliberate care as the act of dismantling. Each nail driven is a suture closing a wound, a promise made solid. The new house, standing in the peaceful Finnish woods, is a hybrid entity. Its soul is old Karelia, its body bears the scars of the journey, and its foundation is freedom. Atami's final look at the structure holds no triumph, only a deep, settled peace. The road of vengeance, paved with bodies and grief, has finally circled back to a beginning. The work of memory is complete. It now has a roof, walls, and a future. The silence that remains is no longer the silence of loss, but the silence of a home. A profound sense of historical rupture hangs over the film's opening, a tangible grief for a land that is geographically present but politically severed. This is not a wilderness to be conquered, but a homeland to be mourned, and Atami Korpi moves through it as the chief mourner. His methodical salvage operation is a quiet, radical act of dissent against the finality of treaties and the erasure they mandate. Each plank carefully stacked on his truck is a retrieved sentence from a burnt book of history. The Soviet patrol that discovers him is an agent of that erasure, mistaking his reverence for subversion. Their fatal error lies in their inability to perceive the sacred within the mundane, seeing only a man with timber, not a spirit with a shrine. Jorma Tommela's physical incarnation of Atami suggests a man whose very biology has been altered by loss and war. His movements are economical, preserving energy like a creature in a permanent state of hibernation awaiting its purpose. The lines on his face seem less like signs of age and more like fissures in granite, revealing the immense pressure contained within. His silence is a void that draws in all sound and emotion, making the occasional, guttural exhalations he releases feel volcanic. This performance invites the audience into a profound act of cinematic empathy. We are compelled to read his soul through the language of action and reaction, becoming collaborators in the construction of his mythos. He is less a character to be explained than a phenomenon to be witnessed. Igor Dragunov, brilliantly rendered by Stephen Lang, is a study in ideological decay. He is a man who has weaponized his bitterness, wrapping personal vendetta in the banner of state security. His speeches to his men are masterpieces of twisted logic, blending communist dogma with a predatory hunger that is entirely his own. Atami represents to him the ultimate loose end, a living testament to an operation that was never fully cleaned. Dragunov's pursuit is therefore an attempt to achieve a perfect, sterile past, to retroactively correct a flaw in his own brutal record. The Soviet state, in unleashing him, believes it is employing a specialist, but it is actually feeding a personal demon that will consume its resources and tarnish its authority. The film's visual grammar expertly contrasts the rooted and the rootless. Atami is consistently photographed in connection with the earth, emerging from it, moving through its contours, using its materials. He possesses a proprioceptive understanding of the landscape, a knowledge written in muscle memory. The Soviet forces, by contrast, are perpetually on the land, not of it. Their vehicles scar the terrain, their camps are temporary blemishes, their presence is an abrasive overlay. This fundamental disconnect is the source of their tactical failure. They are fighting in a living atlas they cannot read, while Atami is navigating the chapters of his own autobiography. Director Jalmari Helander's chapter structure functions as a brutal storybook, with each segment serving as a parable on a different facet of resilience. This format allows for a diverse exploration of action, from tense, silent stalking to large-scale, explosive confrontations. It creates a rhythmic, almost episodic momentum, giving the audience clear milestones in Atami's odyssey. The titles of these chapters act as grimly poetic signposts: the river, the convoy, the bridge, charting a path of destruction that is also, paradoxically, a path to preservation. We are not just watching a chase. We are witnessing the birth of a legend, one bloody, unforgettable episode at a time. The journey of the timber is the film's spiritual backbone, an object whose meaning evolves with each trial. It begins as a grave, is transformed into a burden, then a toolkit, a weapon, a life raft, and finally a seed. In its most powerful moments, the wood acts as a tactile link to Atami's lost family. He handles it with a care that transcends utility, a tenderness reserved for relics. When he employs a beam to break a lock or a plank to bridge a gap, he is not just solving a problem, but integrating the spirit of his past into the mechanics of his survival. The rebuilt house is therefore an act of alchemy, where the base materials of memory and suffering are transmuted into a sanctuary for the future. The film's action operates on a deliciously exaggerated cause and effect principle that feels both absurd and satisfyingly logical. It embraces a cartoon physics where the consequences of an act are spectacularly, often gruesomely, amplified. A sniper's bullet doesn't just wound. It triggers a chain reaction involving fuel, physics, and bad luck that annihilates an entire platoon. This style creates a unique comedic rhythm amidst the horror, a sense of grim whimsy where the environment itself conspires to punish the invaders in increasingly inventive ways. The audience's delight stems from watching a Rube Goldberg machine of vengeance, meticulously constructed by Atami's understanding of his enemy's own arrogance and the landscape's latent violence. Dragunov's mental fragmentation is a slow-motion unraveling captured with precision by Lang. He begins as the epitome of cold, Soviet rationality, a believer in systems, firepower, and ideological supremacy. Each encounter with Atami serves as a hammer blow to this worldview. The immortal Finn's defiance of physics and probability forces Dragunov to confront the limitations of his dogma. We see his certainty curdle into superstition, his commands become erratic shouts, his demeanor shifting from calculated to crazed. He ends not as a colonel but as a haunted fanatic, his mission stripped of political pretense, laid bare as a primal, personal need to kill a ghost. The auditory landscape is a meticulously crafted battlefield of sounds. The natural world provides a baseline symphony of wind, water, and wildlife, a soundscape of permanence. The Soviet invasion is a cacophony of industrial dissonance. Grinding engines, static-filled radio chatter, the metallic clatter of weapons. Atami exists in the spaces between these sounds, his movements often eerily quiet. When violence erupts, it is a catastrophic collision of these auditory worlds. The organic thud of flesh and wood meeting the mechanical shriek of tearing metal. The musical score, used with strategic restraint, acts as an emotional heart monitor, only swelling to highlight moments of mythic resolve or profound sorrow. Never merely to underline action, Atami's resilience is portrayed as a form of symbiotic endurance with the natural world. He does not conquer the harsh Finnish environment, he partners with it. The freezing water, the dense forest, the rocky ground. These are not obstacles but allies, elements he understands and utilizes. His Sisu is the human manifestation of the land's own stubborn refusal to be tamed. The Soviets, insulated by their machines and uniforms, are alien to this partnership. They fight against the environment, wasting energy and focus, while Atami flows with it. His victories are often environmental victories. He allows the river to drown engines, the forest to hide his trail, the cold to sap his pursuer's will. The Soviet soldiers are rendered with a degree of humanity that enriches the conflict. They are not faceless hordes but conscripts and junior officers exhibiting fear, confusion, and a weary desire to survive their posting. Their dialogue often reveals a gap between Dragunov's obsessive vendetta and their own mundane desire to avoid trouble. This nuance makes their encounters with Atami more tragically potent. They are not evil antagonists but often pawns caught between a force of nature and a mad commander, their deaths serving as a grim indictment of the system that sent them on this futile, personal crusade. Hellander's synthesis of influences creates a genre uniquely his own. A Nordic survival western with the soul of a silent epic and the adrenaline of a pulp serial. From the western, he takes the archetype of the lone man in a vast, contested landscape. From survival narratives, he borrows the emphasis on ingenuity and limited resources. From silent cinema, he adopts the primacy of visual storytelling and physical expression. From video games, he incorporates the concept of environmental mastery and escalating boss fights. This blend feels entirely fresh, a testament to Hellander's confident voice as an auteur working within and transcending popular genre conventions. The act of transporting the home is a defiant piece of performance art against political oblivion. In an era of mass displacement and rewritten maps, Atami insists on the sovereignty of personal history. He is declaring that some borders are imaginary and some connections, those of blood, memory, and earth, are inviolable. His bloody trail to the Finnish border is a counter-narrative etched in violence, a refusal to let his past be invalidated by a new political reality. He is not just moving wood. He is transplanting a root system, ensuring a family tree severed in one place can take root and flourish in another. The film's color theory is a subtle emotional guide. The present-day narrative is dominated by a cold, desaturated palette of blues, grays, and washed-out greens, mirroring the emotional numbness of occupation and grief. The precious flashbacks glow with warm ambers and golds, a visual shorthand for lost happiness. The violence acts as a jarring injection of hot, primary colors, searing reds, bright oranges, stark whites from muzzle flashes. As Atami nears his goal and takes action, these warmer, more vivid tones begin to infiltrate the present, culminating in the final, sun-drenched scenes of reconstruction. The film's very hue thus charts his journey from cold despair, through the fiery crucible of revenge, and into the warm light of a hard-won future. The film's critical acclaim rests on its ability to be both intellectually satisfying and viscerally thrilling. It demonstrates that depth in action cinema need not come from convoluted plots, but from thematic coherence, symbolic richness, and emotional authenticity. Critics recognized that Hellander had deepened the franchise's emotional core, swapping the first film's simple MacGuffin for a symbol laden with profound cultural and personal resonance. The action, however spectacular, always serves this deeper story of memory and reclamation. Commercially, the film's trajectory illustrates the passionate, if specific, audience for auteur-driven genre work. Its box office, while solid, is perhaps less significant than its role as a cultural ambassador for Finnish cinema and a beacon for practical, inventive action filmmaking. It proves that a film can be unapologetically local in its setting and mythology, yet universally compelling in its execution of primal themes: revenge, resilience, and the longing for home. Its legacy will be as a cult object that rewards repeated viewing, a film where technical mastery and heartfelt storytelling are one and the same. The final confrontation is a clash of cosmic principles, not just men. Dragunov, who believes in the power of the state to erase and redefine, faces Atami, who embodies the power of personal and cultural memory to endure. Atami's victory is achieved not through superior strength alone, but through his unity with his purpose and his environment. He uses the land, the remnants of his home, and the very history Dragunov tried to destroy as his weapons. Dragunov is defeated by the past he thought he had murdered, a poetic and absolute form of justice. He dies realizing, too late, that he was never hunting a man, but a legend, and legends are notoriously hard to kill. The concluding sequence achieves a powerful, wordless serenity. The relentless motion of the chase finally stills, replaced by the purposeful, rhythmic motion of creation. The sound of hammering is a healing cadence, a new heartbeat for a life reborn. The completed house, standing in the peaceful Finnish forest, is a composite being. Its heart is Karelian memory, its skeleton is scarred by war, and its skin is the promise of peace. Atami's final gaze upon it is not one of joy, but of completion. The furious road of vengeance has looped back to its origin, not to the beginning, but to a new beginning. The silence that remains is full, not empty. The silence of a story told, a wound healed, a home standing guard once more. The film commences in a state of profound geographical and spiritual limbo, a borderland where maps have been redrawn, but the soul of the place remains defiantly unchanged. This is a realm of ghosts, and Atami Korpi is the most substantial among them, a revenant made flesh and purpose. His return to the forfeited homestead is an act of archaeological devotion, a meticulous excavation of a personal Pompeii buried under the ash of war and political expediency. Each timber he extracts is a fossilized fragment of a lost ecosystem of love and daily life, carefully brushed clean of the debris of history. The Soviet patrol that stumbles upon this scene represents the new, shallow layer of occupation, unable to comprehend the depths he is plumbing. Their intervention is a desecration of a sacred site, mistaking a solitary act of remembrance for a military provocation. Jorma Tommila embodies Atami as a study in geological time. His presence suggests eons of pressure and weathering, his face a cliff face shaped by relentless storms of violence and loss. His movements are not quick but inevitable, possessing the slow, grinding certainty of continental drift. The silence he carries is a force field, a vacuum that distorts the soundscape around him, making the chatter of his enemies seem tinny and insignificant. To witness Tommila's performance is to engage in a form of cinematic archaeology ourselves. We are tasked with unearthing the man's history from the strata of his scars, the fossils of his fleeting expressions, and the tectonic shifts of his resolve. He is a monument that has decided to go for a walk, and his path becomes a new border. Igor Dragunov, in Stephen Lang's mesmerizing portrayal, is ideology calcified into a hunting dog. He is a man who has internalized the state's paranoia and weaponized his own personal failures within its rhetoric. His dialogue is a corrosive blend of party-line jargon and seething, personalized hatred, revealing how totalitarian systems provide a convenient language for personal pathology. Atami represents to Dragunov the ultimate impurity, a stubborn, living stain on the pristine record of Soviet conquest that he was tasked with enforcing. His mission, therefore, is one of obsessive hygiene, a desperate attempt to sanitize his own past by eliminating the bacterial persistence of this one, immortal Finn. The state unleashes a hound, not realizing the hound only obeys the scent of its own shame. Cinematographically, the film draws a stark line between the innate and the imposed. Atami is consistently framed as an extension of the organic world, his silhouette blending with tree lines, his body submerged in water or coated in the earth he mines for traps. He moves with the fluidity of a natural process. The Soviet forces are depicted as mechanical implants, their vehicles and guns alien grafts upon the landscape. This visual dichotomy articulates the conflict's core. It is the age-old struggle between the native and the invasive species. Atami's tactics are those of a natural predator using camouflage and terrain. The Soviets rely on crude, loud application of force. His success lies in making their technology their tomb, using their own mechanical logic against them in unexpectedly organic ways. Jalmari Hellender's deliberate use of a chapter-based narrative evokes the feeling of a grim fairy tale being recounted, each segment a moral lesson on the price of perseverance. This structure provides a satisfying, episodic cadence, allowing for a diverse portfolio of action set pieces that each showcase a different facet of Atami's ingenuity and endurance. The chapters function like verses in a heroic ballad, with titles that are both descriptive and foreboding. This storybook quality elevates the proceedings from a mere chase film to the realm of foundational myth, suggesting we are witnessing the events that will one day be sung about around fires, the specific hyperbole already baked into the telling. The symbolic cargo of timber undergoes a continuous metamorphosis that mirrors Atami's own journey. It is a coffin, then a cross to bear, then a toolkit, then a literal vessel, and finally, a seed for rebirth. In its most profound utility, the wood acts as a prosthetic memory. When Atami uses a door frame to brace a broken axle or a floorboard to fashion a splint, he is not just repairing his truck or his body, but suturing the functional wisdom of his past life into the desperate needs of his present survival. The final, reconstructed house is therefore not a memorial, but a transplant. It is the heart of old Karelia, beating once more in the chest of New Finland, its pulse strengthened by the very scars of its journey. The film's approach to action is one of glorious, hyperbolic practicality. It operates on a physics of consequence where every action has a reaction that is both spectacularly violent and darkly logical within its own universe. A triggered mind doesn't just explode. It initiates a domino fall of precisely timed calamities that dismantle an enemy position with the brutal efficiency of a Swiss watch designed by a vengeful god. This creates a unique tone of grim exhilaration, where the audience is invited to admire the Rube Goldberg-esque engineering of each kill. The violence is not senseless. It is hypersense, a direct and creatively overwhelming response to every threat, making Atami the ultimate pragmatist in a world of absurd brutality. Dragunov's psychological disintegration is a masterclass in showing the collapse of a worldview. Lang charts a course from arrogant, systemic certainty to trembling, superstitious terror. Initially, Dragunov views Atami through the lens of military doctrine, a problem of logistics and firepower. Each miraculous escape forces him to update his paradigm, until he is left with only pre-modern explanations: witchcraft, demonic possession, or a curse from the land itself. His command unravels alongside his sanity. The crisp, ideological hunter becomes a raving, personal avenger, howling at a universe that refuses to conform to his Soviet-made manual. His defeat is thus intellectual and spiritual long before it is physical. The soundscape is a meticulously layered character in the drama. The ambient sounds of nature, the sigh of wind through pines, the gurgle of a stream, the cry of a distant bird, establish a baseline of ancient, enduring life. The Soviet interlopers bring with them a symphony of industrial dissonance. The diesel roar of engines, the crackle of radio static, the sharp, unnatural reports of their weapons. Atami exists in the quiet interstices of these sonic worlds. The climactic moments of action are then catastrophic collisions of these soundscapes, a cacophony where nature's roar and machine's scream are indistinguishable in their fury. The sparing, poignant score acts not as accompaniment, but as emotional annotation, highlighting the mythic weight of Atami's quest or the deep well of his sorrow. Atami's legendary endurance is portrayed as a form of deep ecological integration. He survives not by battling the elements, but by achieving a state of near symbiosis with them. The punishing cold, the rugged terrain, the scarcity of resources. These are not adversaries, but conditions of his existence, as natural to him as air. His Sisu is the human expression of the boreal forest's own stubborn will to persist. The Soviets, cloistered in their machines and uniforms, are perpetually at war with the environment, fighting a battle on two fronts they never anticipated. Atami's victories are thus environmental victories. He is the conscious agent of a landscape retaliating against a foreign pathogen. The Soviet soldiers are afforded a humanity that makes the conflict more tragically resonant. They are not monolithic evil, but a collection of individuals exhibiting a spectrum of responses, from eager cruelty to weary compliance to palpable fear. Their conversations often reveal the mundane absurdity of military life, a stark contrast to Dragunov's singular, consuming madness. This realistic portrayal makes their encounters with the mythic Atami all the more terrifying and pitiable. They are ordinary men, grist for the mill of a personal feud between a force of nature and a force of ideology, their deaths underscoring the grotesque cost of Dragunov's obsession and the impersonal brutality of the machine they serve. Hellander's alchemical blend of genres results in a cinematic alloy that is uniquely potent. He merges the mythic scope of a national epic with the lean mechanics of a survival thriller, filters it through the visual wit and physical grammar of silent comedy, and delivers it with the unapologetic gusto of a 70s exploitation picture. This synthesis feels entirely original, a testament to a directorial vision confident enough to wear its influences proudly while forging something new. It is a film that speaks a global language of action while retaining a distinctly Finnish soul, proving that the most local stories, told with enough verve and vision, can achieve universal resonance. The transportation of the homestead is a radical act of cultural defiance, a one-man resistance against historical amnesia. In an age of mass displacement and rewritten identities, Atami performs a stubborn piece of performance art. He declares that home is not a coordinate but a constellation of memories, and that constellation can be moved. His bloody pilgrimage to the border is a living counter-narrative to the official story of cession and loss. He is not smuggling lumber, he is smuggling a world. Each plank is a line of a different history, one written not in treaties but in the grain of family life, and he is determined to publish it anew on safe soil. The film's color palette serves as an unspoken emotional narrative. The present-day occupied zone is rendered in a spectrum of cold, drained colors, steel grays, lifeless blues, muddy browns, visualizing a world stripped of warmth and hope. The cherished past, in contrast, lives in a haze of golden light and rich, earthy tones. The violence of Atami's revenge injects searing, primary colors into this washed-out world: arterial red, explosive orange, the blinding white of phosphorus. As he fights his way west, these warmer, more vital hues begin to repopulate the frame, culminating in the final, sun-drenched epilogue where the golden tones of memory finally colonize the present, signaling the victory of life and remembrance over cold oblivion. The film's superior critical reception highlights its evolution from a superb genre piece to a work of deeper thematic maturity. Where the first film was a masterclass in economical, visceral storytelling, the sequel uses that established language to explore more complex ideas of legacy, grief, and the literal rebuilding of a life from its ruins. Critics recognized that Helander had swapped a simple MacGuffin for a powerful symbol, grounding the spectacular action in a soil of genuine emotional and cultural resonance. The film earns its thrills by first earning our understanding of what is truly at stake. Commercially, the film's journey underscores the enduring value of auteur-driven vision in the action space. Its box office, while solid, is ultimately secondary to its role as a benchmark. It stands as a testament to the power of practical effects, coherent mythology, and emotional authenticity in a landscape often dominated by digital spectacle and narrative incoherence. It demonstrates that audiences will respond to distinctive, passionately made films that offer a complete, thrilling, and strangely moving world for 90 minutes. Its true revenue will be measured in its lasting influence and its status as a cult classic. The final clash between Atami and Dragunov is a confrontation of antithetical truths. Dragunov, the agent of erasure, faces Atami, the embodiment of eternal return. Atami's triumph is not merely the killing of his foe, but the demonstration that the past, when carried with sufficient conviction, is an indestructible and ultimately triumphant force. He uses the knowledge of the land, the remnants of his home, and the very history Dragunov sought to exterminate as his instruments of victory. Dragunov is not just defeated, he is rendered obsolete, his worldview proven bankrupt against the older, deeper truth of Sisu. He perishes realizing he tried to erase a ghost, only to be killed by a legend. The denouement achieves a profound, hard-won peace that resonates deeply. The frantic kinetic energy of the chase dissipates, replaced by the purposeful, rhythmic sounds of construction. The hammer strikes are a healing percussion, driving out the echoes of gunfire. The finished house, standing sentinel in the Finnish forest, is a chimera of time. Its spirit is ancestral, its body bears the wounds of passage, and its future is now assured. Atami's final contemplation of it reveals not happiness, but fulfillment, the deep satisfaction of a circle closed, a debt paid, a memory finally sheltered. The road of vengeance, paved with fury and blood, has paradoxically led to the only place it could, a doorstep. And beyond that door, silence no longer means absence, but the presence of a home, whole at last. The opening frames establish a world in a state of profound post-traumatic stress, where the very geography seems to hold its breath. This is not merely a setting but a patient, a land nursing the wound of amputation as Karelia is severed from Finland. Atami Korpi enters as a phantom limb made manifest, a pain so acute it has taken solid form. His meticulous deconstruction of the homestead is a surgical procedure, a careful dissection to remove a vital organ before the host body fully succumbs. Each extracted nail whines a protest, each lowered beam sighs with the weight of history. The Soviet observers, with their binoculars and reports, are diagnosticians of a foreign ideology, entirely misreading the symptoms of a spiritual crisis as those of espionage or sabotage. Their fatal intervention is a catastrophic misdiagnosis. Jorma Tommela's Atami is a monument to negative space, a character defined more by what has been removed, family, voice, homeland, than by what remains. His physicality suggests a man hollowed out by grief, and then refilled with a substance denser than lead, granting him terrible, implacable weight. His silence is not an absence but a presence, a vacuum that exerts a gravitational pull on the narrative, bending events and motivations around it. To watch Tamala is to witness a form of anti-acting. He is a conduit for absence, his performance a meticulously controlled study in restraint where a flicker in the eye speaks of a roaring internal conflagration. He is less a hero and more a natural law, the principle of vengeance personified, operating with the cold certainty of physics. Igor Dragunov, as realized by Stephen Lang, is a perfect specimen of institutional rot. He is a man who has allowed the state's apparatus to fuse with his own psychopathology, creating a hybrid creature of bureaucratic cruelty and personal spite. His rhetoric is a weaponized sludge of Marxist-Leninist jargon and seething, egotistical fury, revealing how easily dogma can be perverted into a license for personal annihilation. Atomy represents to Dragunov the ultimate heresy, a living refutation of the Soviet claim to total control, both territorial and historical. The Colonel's hunt is thus an act of blasphemy against a rival religion, a crusade to destroy a resilient, pagan god of the Finnish woods who defies the state's atheism of the spirit. The system unleashes its inquisitor, blind to the fact his faith is in his own vindication. Visually, the film constructs a stark theology of the rooted versus the transient. Atomy is filmed in communion with the earth. He rises from it like an autochthonous spirit, uses its rivers as arteries, and treats its forests as a sacred cathedral. He is an intrinsic part of the liturgy of the land. The Soviet forces are profane invaders, their presence a violent graffiti upon a holy text they cannot read. Their machines are loud idols, their uniforms a sacrilegious uniform against the organic diversity of nature. Atomy's success is that of a devout practitioner against arrogant missionaries. He knows the secret passages of the sanctuary, turns their own desecrating tools into instruments of divine wrath, and proves that the native faith is older and stronger. Jalmari Hellander's chapter structure mirrors the act of memory itself, fragmented, episodic, with certain moments burning brighter and more vividly than others. Each segment is a recovered shard of a catastrophic event, a piece of the mosaic of survival. This format allows the film to breathe between eruptions of violence, offering pockets of eerie calm and strategic preparation that deepen the suspense. The chapters feel like entries in a lost journal of a war the history books forgot, each heading a terse, grim summary of a trial overcome. We are not following a linear plot so much as assembling a myth from its constituent bloody parts. The Timbers Odyssey is the film's most potent alchemy, transforming from architecture to artifact to arsenal to architecture once more. It functions as Atomy's externalized nervous system, a physical network connecting his traumatic past to his volatile present. When he uses a mantelpiece to block a bullet or a roof beam to create a lever, he is asserting that the domestic wisdom of peace, the knowledge of load-bearing walls and sturdy joints, is directly applicable to the architecture of war. The final rebuilt house is therefore a synthesis, a dialectical resolution where the thesis of a peaceful past and the antithesis of a violent journey merge into a new synthesis. A home that has been tested by fire and proven unburnable. The action choreography embraces a kind of brutal, pragmatic surrealism. It operates on a dream logic where the subconscious fear of the pursuers, of the land itself turning against them, is made vividly, gorily real. A perfectly placed shot doesn't just kill a driver. It sends a vehicle into a balletic, catastrophic dance of destruction that consumes several others. This approach generates a perverse, awe-inspiring beauty in the chaos, a sense that Atomy is not just fighting but composing, orchestrating a symphony of cause and effect where every note is a detonation and every movement is fatal. The violence becomes a form of extreme expressionism, illustrating his rage and grief in strokes of shrapnel and fire. Dragunov's psychic collapse is the slow-motion shattering of a mirror. Lang portrays him initially as a man who sees the world and himself with cold, ideological clarity. Atomy is the stone that fractures that glass. Each failure distorts the reflection, until Dragunov no longer sees a capable officer but a mocked, impotent fool staring back. His descent into superstition and rage is the sound of that mirror finally crashing to the floor. He transitions from hunter to haunted, from pursuer to prey of his own burgeoning myth of the immortal Finn. His command, once crisp, becomes a series of screeches into a void, his authority evaporating as his men witness his transformation from commander to crazed prophet of his own doom. The auditory design constructs a world where sound equals threat. The peaceful world Atomy seeks to reclaim is one of specific natural acoustics. The crackle of a hearth, the rustle of trees, the quiet voices of family. The Soviet occupation is a blanket of oppressive industrial noise designed to drown out those older, softer sounds. Atami's mastery lies in using silence as a weapon and in manipulating the invader's own noise against them, using the roar of an engine to mask his movement, or the predictable rhythm of gunfire to time his attack. The moments of violent climax are then deafening collisions of these sonic worlds, a cacophony that temporarily obliterates all order. The musical score functions as the film's collective unconscious, rising only to voice the epic, unspoken emotions too vast for the diegetic world to contain. Atami's resilience is presented as a form of deep-time endurance. He possesses not the stamina of an athlete, but the persistence of a bedrock outcrop that has witnessed ice ages. His Sisu is geological. The Soviets, with their temporal perspective limited to 5-year plans and immediate military objectives, are like harsh weather scouring that rock, annoying, erosive, but ultimately transient. He wins by outlasting, by being a fact of the landscape they cannot budge. His strategies are those of erosion, letting their own momentum and arrogance wear them down against the immovable object of his will. He is less a fighter and more a condition they must suffer. The Red Army soldiers are portrayed with a collective psyche that ranges from cynical to blindly obedient. They are men shaped by the immense, impersonal trauma of the Eastern Front, now relegated to the mundane terror of occupation duty. Their reactions to Atami, from dismissive to terrified, map onto their individual capacities to believe in the supernatural. They serve as a Greek chorus, their escalating fear providing a gauge for Atami's mounting legend. Their deaths are not heroic but pathetic, futile sacrifices to Dragunov's ego, highlighting the grotesque waste of war even within a film of such stylized violence. They remind us that for every mythic hero, there is a ditch filled with anonymous, forgotten men. Hellander's genre fusion is less a blending and more a forging in a furnace of pure cinematic ID. He takes the stoic archetype from a samurai film, the survivalist grit from a man-against-nature narrative, the vehicular mayhem from a gearhead thriller, and the physical comedy of silent clowns, and submits them to the intense pressure of a Finnish national trauma. What emerges is a new alloy, the Sisu epic, a genre of one so far. It is a form that demands emotional sincerity amidst absurd violence, and historical specificity amidst universal themes. It proves that the most potent genre films are often those that emerge from a specific, passionate cultural idée fixe. The transportation of the home is an act of profound ontological defiance. In a world where political realism declares this land is no longer yours, Atami responds with a deeper realism. My home is where I build it. He rejects the tyranny of the map in favor of the sovereignty of memory. His bloody exodus is therefore a migration of a world, a climate of love and loss packed into a truck and driven through hell. He is not crossing a border. He is moving a border with him, extending the spiritual territory of his past into the political territory of his future. Each plank is a seed of a different reality, and he is the farmer determined to plant a forest. The film's chromatics are a secret emotional narrative. The palette of occupation is one of chemical colors. The dull green of Soviet wool, the gunmetal gray of steel, the washed-out blue of a cold sky. These are colors of manufacture and control. The world of Atami's memory and his visceral present is one of organic pigments. The rich umber of soil, the deep crimson of blood, the vibrant gold of flame, the dark grain of his timber. The film's progression is the gradual staining of the chemical world with these organic hues. By the end, the synthetic palette is defeated, overwhelmed by the warm, living colors of a rebuilt life under a natural sun. The film's critical triumph lies in its demonstration of aesthetic and thematic confidence. It received praise not for being more of the same, but for intelligently evolving the premise into richer emotional territory. Critics recognized that the shift from gold to timber was a masterstroke, transforming the sequel from a mere repetition into a poignant continuation that deepened the hero's tragedy and ultimate purpose. The action, however spectacular, is now in service of a metaphor so potent it elevates the entire endeavor. The fight to literally rebuild a life from its shattered foundations. Commercially, the film stands as a testament to the enduring power of a strong, directorial vision in the global marketplace. Its financial performance, while not record-breaking, validates the existence of a space for mid-budget, auteur-driven action films with a distinct national flavor. It succeeds by being uncompromisingly itself, offering a product that cannot be generically replicated by a studio algorithm. Its value is in its crafted specificity, its authenticity of violence and emotion, proving that in an era of digital homogeneity, audiences still crave the weight and texture of a world hand-forged by a passionate filmmaker. The final confrontation is a ritual of exorcism. Dragunov, the demon of Atami's past, must be confronted on the physical and psychological ground of that past's remnants. Atami's victory is not an act of murder, but a ceremony of banishment. He uses the tools and materials of his destroyed life as the ritual instruments to cast out the spirit that destroyed it. Dragunov is not just killed, he is purged, his significance to Atami's story annihilated along with his body. He dies realizing he was never the hunter, but the sacrifice required for the hero to complete his journey from haunted man to whole human being. The epilogue achieves a resonance that is almost spiritual. The frantic, survivalist energy of the film dissipates into the focused, creative energy of construction. The sounds of industry are no longer those of war machines, but of a hammer finding its mark, a saw singing through wood. The completed house is a sanctuary earned through a pilgrimage of blood. It is a reliquary for memory, a fortress for the future, and a bridge between the man Atami was and the man he must now become. His final look is one of release. The road of revenge, a path of pure negation, has ended at the only act of true affirmation possible, the making of a home. The silence that follows is the sound of a soul, after a long and terrible journey, finally coming to rest.